Damn right they should caucus, absolutely. They should be caucusing together and saying, right, we've actually got a really important role to play here, and you guys in those urban areas, you in the Central Belt, you need us, and don't forget that you need us, and this is what we want.
Thanks for your emails. These help. Good discussion. Right, this one is from Mark McGagan. He says, hey guys, I have a follow-up question to your discussion of Scottish Government policy making, particularly Andy's comment that the perception in rural areas is that policy is not being made in their interests, which is, how have we wound up in this situation? Excuse me. Mark goes on, while Scotland's population distribution means the urban population will always have greater representation at Holyrood than rural communities, they are, nevertheless, represented by more than enough MSPs to shape government policy making. For example, excluding the primarily urban seats, Highlands and Islands and North East Scotland MSPs are roughly a fifth of government MSPs. There are as many government MSPs representing the Highlands and Islands now as there have been in any parliamentary term out with the 2011 to 2016 Parliament. So what part of the constituent MSP government relationship is breaking down here? And would it be wise / possible for rural MSPs to caucus together on rural issues to address that breakdown? Loving the pod as always, says Mark.
It's a really interesting question, and there's really interesting aspects to that question. I love that question from Mark. The rural-urban thing. Yes, there are a lot of MSPs from the governing party from rural areas. But I don't think there's a lot of MSPs from the governing party from rural areas around the cabinet table. So if you look at the cabinet, the only two constituencies that you could suggest are rural are probably Mary McCallan's constituency in Clydesdale and Mary Gudgeon's constituency in Angus. But Mary Gudgeon's constituency's got the A90 running through the middle of it, and Mary McCallan's constituency at the top end is 15 minutes from Glasgow. So it's not exactly back end of nowhere territory. I'm not sure the really remote rural areas are particularly well represented at cabinet level. It is quite an urban cabinet. So although, yes, there are MSPs from the governing party who are from rural areas, perhaps they are not in positions of significant power. So I think that might do something to answer that question. I think the other part of that as well is there is a bit of a legacy. And this is not all the fault of those of us in urban areas. Sometimes that is the fault of those of us in rural areas as well. There's a bit of a legacy of feeling like you are put upon if you're in a rural area. There's a bit of a begging bowl. There's a bit of a, you need to help us because we're struggling so much here. That attitude does prevail. I mentioned last week that, I've got family from the Western Isles. I spend a lot of time in the Western Isles, so I don't feel I'm being too disrespectful by saying that. I think it's a fair critique to say that those in remote and rural areas often do look and ask for help. The shoe might start to go onto the other foot here. Look at the rest of this century. Where is this country's prosperity going to come from for the rest of this century? Look at renewable energy. All of it takes place in remote and rural areas, whether it's onshore or offshore. It all takes place in remote and rural areas. Okay, the northeast, you might not categorise that as Aberdein, but if you look right round the rest of the coast, a lot of that is where that's taking place. Salmon farming, the biggest food export that this country has, all of that takes place in remote and rural areas. Whisky distilleries, all in remote and rural areas. I think that rural communities should be a bit more bullish about what they have to offer. A little bit less of, please Edinburgh help us, and a little bit more of, listen Edinburgh, you better do what we need here or we're not going to help you. And I think that's where the second part of Mark's question comes in about caucusing. Damn right they should caucus, absolutely. They should be caucusing together and saying, right, we've actually got a really important role to play here, and you guys in those urban areas, you in the Central Belt, you need us, and don't forget that you need us, and this is what we want.
Yeah, I'm going to come in on that exact point, Andy. If you take Cromarty, Nig, Ardissair, Peterhead, Fraserburgh, Port of Aberdeen, Montrose, right? That's the Highlands and Islands, East Coast facing conurbation all the way round to the northeast of Scotland. Without those ports, we're not going to get to net zero. With those ports, we're going to be the drivers of the future economy of Scotland. This is the green industrialisation of our country, as I've talked about many times. What stronger position could you be in if you were a North East and Highlands and Isles parliamentarian, to form a caucus and speak where you can with one voice. And you're absolutely right, Andy. It's not Edinburgh, can you help us out? It's we're the ones that are going to help you out for the long term, and so you'd better meet our demands. And I think that's a great idea from Mark, my fellow psephologist.
Mark can start the caucus. He could start why not just start a rural party? Me, Mark and Geoff. Terribly badly gender balanced, but we could give it a go. You never know.
Thank you so much for watching. Press subscribe and you'll get all the best videos offering insight on Scottish politics delivered straight to your feed. Press subscribe and stick around. And if you'd like to hear our conversations in full, open up your podcast app and search for Holyrood Sources.